Hi, my name is Eva Steiner, and this is my project Psychotherapists Around the Globe. I am interviewing the psychotherapists around the world and asking them the same 8 questions. I am wondering how mental health profession is in their country. Today we are going to. Thank you for taking this time for doing this interview with me. Before we start, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
All right, so hi, Eva. Firstly, I would love to appreciate and thank you for giving me this opportunity to just have this conversation with you. So my name is Apoche Nwenzo Muzumba. I'm a therapist by profession. I'm a mental health advocate as well as a podcaster.
So tell me a little bit about your culture. What is some holiday or tradition that your country celebrates? And if your culture would be an emotion, what emotion would it be?
Zambia comprises of about 72 languages. All right, so you can imagine how vast our culture is. We are so many. These 72 tribes or languages vary even in their culture. But mostly as a culture, Zambian culture is more inclined to a collectivist kind of approach compared to the individualistic kind of approach. We believe that raising a child is being raised by a whole village. So we are more hospitable. There is a spirit of community. Yes. And if I would describe my culture as an emotion, I think it would be a mixed emotion. It wouldn't be one. It would be mixed emotion, but obviously comprised or embodying a sense of spirit of community as well as hospitality and love. And there's so much warmth.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any tradition that all Zambia celebrates together?
Each tribe or language celebrates a different kind of culture where they have their own traditional ceremonies. Like I personally, I come from the southern part of the country, so we celebrate what we call Luindi or Gode ceremony for the Tonga people, where they come together, they clap for the rains, they expect and pray together. They have some miracles, and there's a lot of things that happen. We have Easterners, the Alozi people, they also celebrate, they have their own time. So we have like holidays, like for the Tonga people, it usually occurs around July. We usually have that ceremony. It happens annually. The president is there and we celebrate. Yes.
So how did you become a psychotherapist in your country, and what is your therapeutic approach?
Firstly, obviously, I had to go to school and I trained in the field of educational psychology, okay, and partly clinical psychology. Yes. So I had to go through that professional training. And then on top of that, I'm very passionate about mental health. So I've always been advocating for mental health because mental health has been an area, an aspect which has been neglected in my country for quite some time. So we are trying to champion the need of mental health in Zambia. So because I've always been very enthusiastic, I would go for radio interviews and TV shows just to raise awareness, bring about advocacy, and also try to eradicate all negative stereotypes around mental health. And so when an opportunity came, I applied and then I was called for an interview, and that's how I got the job as a psychotherapist. I use as a psychotherapist. Usually, we have quite a number of approaches, so it goes according to what kind of problem you're dealing with and what kind of a person you are dealing with. So you see which approach best suits each individual.
And in general in Zambia, what education do you need to do to be allowed to work in mental health field?
So mostly it has to do with counseling courses. It can be cognitive behavioral therapies, psychology, and all these. But mostly they have to be like psychology related programs.
And you need to finish like university, or it's more about you have a variety of courses and you apply for one, and then after you finish, you are able to work.
Yeah, you have to go to university. Some of them don't really go for the entire program. They'll go just maybe for specific courses, maybe for family therapy or couple counseling or sex therapist, so you can choose to go and specialize in one of those courses, but also you can go and do a general program where you go to university, study for years, and then after that you because at the end of the day it's the qualification that you need, because we need people who are trained and not, counseling, most people will mistake it for advice giving. So there is a difference, and you must have certain documentations which allow you or authorize you to say, okay, this person is qualified to be able to handle this profession.
How society looks upon psychotherapy or any psychological help?
Okay, so that question is actually very interesting because I think our culture and being Zambian, we really need much more sensitization when it comes to how people look at psychotherapy or getting help in terms of, therapy and whatnot. Usually they'll look at you as a person who's maybe has a mental disorder. People don't know that therapy is so wide. You could be dealing with academic, therapy. It could be family, as long as they hear therapy, what comes to their minds is, okay, this person has a mental health disorder or something like that. So there are a lot of misconceptions. There are lots of negative stereotypes that are still surrounding that conception. But I'm very happy about the strides that the Zambian government is also making in showing interest in championing the need for mental health in Zambia. So I think there are a lot of other institutions, rehabilitation centers that are mushrooming to come and just, care and educate people about what therapy really is. Yeah, maybe the perception it will be changing with time.
And what are some stereotypes regarding mental health that you came across?
Some of the common ones is like, if, let's say, for instance, somebody is epileptic, they have, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. Society will look at them as people who are demon possessed. They have to go for demon casting in order for them to be fine. No, it's contagious. If you step their saliva, you contract the disease. If those people are mad, they're not all right. There's all these negative stereotypes around mental health, and they believe if you go for therapy, you definitely are not okay upright there.
And what made you to decide to educate people regarding mental health?
I've lived with people that have had mental health challenges, and also growing up, my personality, I'm an introverted person, and I was very antisocial. So I had a lot of things that I was battling with when I was growing up, and I didn't know how to deal with them. I didn't know who to talk to, okay? And I thought this is the norm. And then when I went to university, I studied psychology, and that's when I started to understand what was happening in my life back then. And so I thought, if I've been in this position before, it's most likely there are a lot of other people who are going through the same situation. They do not know what to do, but they do need the help. So I decided, I think that's when I opened my podcast, my Paramount Mental Health Hub podcast, which I run, where I just educate people about issues on mental health and all the surrounding, concerns.
The way I am understanding you right now, it's like that mental health is not widespread, that your country is still learning, or still like you need to inform people about what is actually therapy, what can they gain from the therapy. I'm getting the right sense?
That's true, especially like when we talk about marriage and couple counseling. Recently, I think it was just broadcasted on a TV station that about 36,000 marriages filed in for divorce. Why? Because we do not have, centers that are helping people with couple therapy, sex therapy. Young people that are getting into marriages do not know how to resolve their issues, and there's nowhere they can access this help. And also, mental health services in Zambia are not quite affordable and easily accessible. So right now, as it is, many people actually say mental health in Zambia is for the rich people because it's quite expensive to get those services. Just for you to get one therapy session, it's quite pricey, and maybe you need at least 3 or 4 sessions in a week. There's a lot that is involved. So for you to and then maybe minimum for you at least to see a difference, or for you to see that you've made progress in your therapy process, you at least need a minimum maybe of 3 or 6 months, depending on what kind of problem that you're dealing with. So now, where are you getting the money to pay for 3 sessions every week? So at the end of the day, despite people needing or wanting to access mental health services, because there's some money, there's a fee that is attached, they find themselves, depressed or staying back at home. They can't access this help because they don't have the money.
And is there any other profession that maybe deals with mental health or help people with mental health problems?
Not entirely, but the hospitals do have some departments, but the departments are just like, they're just there, but they're not functional. You understand what I mean? Like maybe just a few government hospitals do have, And then those services are like very bad and maybe understaffed in terms of service. Maybe there are very few members of staff. So you find that the facility is overcrowded. There are a lot of people. People actually do not want to go to government mental health facilities because of the bad, services, the conditions that are not conducive and whatnot. Yeah, it's quite challenging. I would say mental health is not so good right now in Zambia, but we've been trying to reach out to policymakers so that there's inclusion and they look into the aspect of mental health. And I think something is coming up.
With all these different tribes, and languages, like how the community deals with mental health, like is there like maybe, I don't know, community stepping together?
I wouldn't say there's any community right now that will just come up and try to help people that are suffering with mental. It's really bad, especially when you go in the rural areas where people are illiterate, they don't know anything. Anything that has to do with mental instability it's looked as demon possession, and the only help they can offer you is maybe going to pray for you, casting out demons, exorcism and whatnot. But a person just needs something else. Maybe somebody has dementia and they're praying for them. Somebody has schizophrenia. Then the approach that they're using is wrong. They're trying to help, but the approach is wrong. So at the end of the day, work done is equals to zero. Yeah. So communities are not so much that I would say they are coming up together, maybe in the urban areas, but a few of them as well, unless you really just go to specific mental health facilities where they actually deal with such issues.
And do you have like this separation, psychologist and psychiatrics, and giving the medication to a patient?
Yeah, we do have. So, like, for instance, even like when you come at the rehab center, maybe you're seeking, when you are in an assessment room, there's a psychologist, there's a clinician, there's a psychiatrist, and there are also theological counselors for people that are like maybe too into religion or spiritual, maybe they believe in something. So, we want to get a holistic perspective, check your body. Medically, maybe you have substances that are actually affecting your brain, your thought process, and whatnot, psychologically, socially. So there's a psychosocial assessment that is conducted to understand a holistic perspective of where the problem could be coming from and what kind of help this person would be needing.
What is your society teaching about child-parent relationship, and whether these values of society also reflect how you design your interventions as a therapist?
When it comes to child-parent relationship, the Zambian society teaches about obedience. Okay, we look at parents as authoritative figures who are there to guide us, give us guidance, instruction, counsel, and whatnot. So we hold them in high esteem. And when you're being raised as a Zambian child, you are always taught to respect your elderlies. Sometimes I think there are certain things which are even like overlooked. Sometimes maybe the parent could be wrong and whatnot, but you're not allowed to speak because, as long as they're your elderlies, you're supposed to respect them or give them so much respect. So even when it comes to designing interventions as therapists, respect is one of the things that we really incorporate if we are to create peace between a Zambian child and their parent. Love, peace, but mostly, ultimately, I would say it's respect. So mostly it's based on obedience.
And if an adult client comes to you and say, I don't want to contact with my parents anymore, how do you approach in that case?
So we try to dig deep and find out what leads to, the situation coming to that point where the child does not want to talk to their parent or whatnot. Because, I mean, a parent is somebody that we look up to, and obviously they will help us with a lot of things. They will guide us. They love us. So sometimes there's a lot of misunderstanding because you are a child and there are certain concepts that you cannot understand. And also there are different forms of love. Parents can love us differently. There's what they call tough love. A parent really does love you, but the approach to which they're trying to express their love is not something that you can understand as a child. So at the end of the day, we try to understand what the root cause is, and then we bring together and also hear the perspective of the parent. What does the parent feel about, the relationship that they have with the child? If they had a conflict, what is their form of conflict resolution? How do they resolve their issues? And then you come in after you hear both parties, then you come in with a much mutual perspective that will help both of them understand each other. Because at the end of the day, you find that they're just not understanding each other. maybe the parent is trying to express themselves, but they have a different perspective. The child also wants to be understood in a certain way, but it's like they're both trying to force it on each other at the same time, so it doesn't work. But then when you sit down the client, you talk to them, you listen to them, their side of the story, you also call and sit down with the parent and talk to them, you hear them, then you will be able to identify where the loopholes are, and then you can bring them together.
And how do you approach in case of the abuse?
In case of abuse, now that one is quite sensitive, so it depends with the form of abuse that is there. So usually, if a child is being abused, they will not really, show it. Mostly, if they're showing their form of abuse, they'll project their anger or frustration upon the other children, on their weaker ones. These are children who are rude, they want to fight all the time because they have that frustration inside. They can't defend themselves when they are being abused with their parents. They're defenseless, so you try to inquire from the child. Sometimes you even involve play therapy if the child is too young, so that you're able to probe and get more information, talk to them, and when they finally open up, if it's a case that is endangering the life of a child, you need to make sure that you put up measures that are going to safeguard or protect the child, so that even as you're approaching the parent about the issue, they don't come out in such a way that they feel betrayed by the child. Because at the end of the day, the thing that you're really focusing on right now is the child, and you have to protect that child at all costs. So you have to be very mindful of the approach that you're going to use, how you're going to speak to the parent, and even as you talk to them, don't make it look like they are bad people. Try to make them feel, like you're understanding them, whatever is happening. They're trying to discipline this child until you get to the root cause of the issue. And if it has to involve, authorities coming in, then you hand over to other enforcement bodies.
So what are the learned beliefs regarding client-therapist relationship, and can the relationship continue outside the therapy once the therapy process is over?
Okay, so when it comes to client therapist relationship, it's built on trust. So just like I said, in Zambia, mental health is not so widely recognized. There are very few rehabilitation centers. Maybe here in the capital city of the country, there are quite at least a number of them that are mushrooming and coming up. But in other parts of the country, like the remote areas, it's not there. And most people feel like, you can just talk to anybody. You don't have to go for therapy. People don't realize the role that therapy plays in helping them deal with the toughest situations of life. So when a person comes for therapy, the relationship has to be built on trust and confidentiality, because people are very skeptical here. They'll be like, what if I talk to you, I tell you about something, I open up to you, and then you sell me out, you give my information out. So you have to assure them of confidentiality and anonymity if they have to be kept anonymous, all those issues. But mainly the relationship is built on trust. Once your client knows that they can trust you, they'll be able to open up, they can confide, they'll be able to, talk about even the issues that they've never spoken about with anybody else. So the relationship can continue, but it still has to be kept professional. Though with time, it can become a bit casual and informal, but you have to, like, as a trained profession, you yourself, your side. So you have to be professional at all times, even if you throw in a little humor here and there, but make sure at the end of the day, you don't skip your boundaries. Yeah, you have to keep it. Because clients can be very dramatic sometimes. They may forget that you are their therapist. Of course, they should be that relationship where they don't feel like you are this authoritative figure. They need to feel a friendly space as well. But at the end of the day, you should be able to draw a clear line to say, okay, at the end of the day, I'm still your therapist, and there must be some form of respect.
You mentioned, for example, in child-parent relationship, there is obedience going on. Is something similar when the client comes to therapy, that they expect you to give them direction, or think that they need to obey what you say? Do you see that reflect also on the client-therapist relationship?
Yeah, we do see it a lot, actually, especially if you're dealing with a child. You see how a child is just always trying to feel like they have to obey everything that has to be said. But then we also try to re-emphasize every time that even if what you're feeling is not right, at the end of the day, you have to say it, you have to express it, so that you're given help to say, okay, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. But if you keep it under, nobody will know what you are dealing with, and obviously the help will not come. So at the end of the day, we allow them to express themselves freely, how they feel, how they would love to be treated, because we want them to recover as well. Yeah, but there are
Mm-hmm.
so many times when they feel like, they have to obey you. So sometimes you have to tell, no, feel free. Tell me really what is there. What would you love to see? How do you want to be treated? And they'll be able to express, they'll tell you. And some of them maybe that have abusive parents, they'll tell you, even if my mom is wrong, they're the ones who wronged me, they'll not apologize by virtue of them being my parent. They feel they can do anything to me. But it's not right at the end of the day, whether you are the mother, when you wrong your child, go and apologize, treat them well, because you don't know the kind of monster that you are building, those frustrations where you just feel like you can do anything to your child and go away with it.
How available is actually therapy? Can a client come privately or publicly or both?
So you can customize the therapy sessions according to, maybe if a person is really busy, maybe they can find time. Sometimes they even do like virtual online sessions. If it's too severe, they can come, in person physically. And some of them, like the rehabilitation center that I work for, it's much more inclined to dealing with addiction recovery. So with those that have like severe cases where, maybe somebody has been into addiction, drug, alcohol addiction, maybe for the past 15, 20 years, and, they need help. We admit them into our sober houses where they have to stay in a controlled environment where they're not exposed to all these drugs and whatnot. So it depends on the severity of the problem.
And are there a lot of therapists in Zambia, or is this like a new profession?
I can say it's quite new. There are not so many, but I've seen quite because I think the past 3, 4 years, everyone is just like advocating for mental health, especially after COVID-19 pandemic. Everybody was so emotionally traumatized or losing loved ones. So everybody now came to see the importance and the need for therapy because they needed to talk to somebody. They needed to be helped. So after that, I feel like there's a lot of people that are actually showing much more interest in taking the field of the professional psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm. And is a therapy session paid through health insurance, or you need to pay it privately?
So it depends. There are those that come and can pay like physically when they get to the institution. And then if you are accredited with any health insurance, you can still be covered under your insurance as well.
Okay, so is supervision a must for a therapist in your country?
We do have that from time to time, and sometimes they do it secretly. Maybe somebody will be observing you from afar and you're not aware, and then you'll be given feedback, okay, this is, you are doing great. Or sometimes actually for the rehab center that I work for, how they judge or determine that you are doing a great job is from how your clients are recovering. So if your clients are doing much more better, they're able to open up. Maybe this was a person who was very closed up, and then they're given to you. You start handling them and trying to help them, and then they seem to become more responsive. Then they're able to determine to say, okay, this therapist is working well. So the supervision does not come always directly, but there is, but it's very minimal.
And what are the most common complaints that the client comes to therapy for?
Okay, so the most common complaints that clients here come for is usually depression and alcohol addiction. But even alcohol addiction, I feel like it's masked in depression. It's depression that leads people into addiction. So the major complaint that I can say that people come for is depression. We have people who are coming with, suicidal attempts. People who are traumatized, like people just are dealing with different forms of depression. So the most common one that I would say is depression, because even 90% of the addicts that we have are, depressed. They're suffering from some form of trauma or some pain that they didn't deal with. And so they resorted into addiction.
Yeah, do you feel there is anything, I don't know, in the culture, in a sense of like something going on in the country that a lot of people feel depressed, or it's just like, of course, every country has a population and some population is depressed?
So I'd say the culture does contribute in some way, because a good number of the depression cases that we're dealing with, most of them, statistics show that it's men, okay, and they resort into addiction. Why? Because society expect so much of a man. Some of the expectations are even so unrealistic, to be put on a child. Just by virtue of you being a man, you're expected to provide, you're expected to do what, even when the economy is not allowing it, maybe even the environmental situations around you don't allow it. By virtue of being a man, you must live up to a certain standard. And if you can't meet those standards, people are laughing at you. No, you're not a guy enough. You're not, you're a coward. You can't do this and that. So in the end, they resort into, alcohol addiction to just try to succumb or suppress that pain or shame. They resort into alcohol. And before they know it, they're addicted, because addiction is also like, it's gradual. You not know at what point you've become addicted. So out of whatever society is trying to push or impose on these young men, they find themselves depressed.
So if you would share one tool, belief, or approach that is a must-have for you as a therapist, what would that be?
So for me, the must that I should have is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I feel like it's the most important because it encompasses the three aspects: the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. So if a person is acting in a certain way, what is making them act that way? It means there's a certain feeling that is, preceding that behavior, and that feeling is also preceded by a certain thought. So what is your thought pattern? We begin from the thoughts. We want to know your thought pattern. How are your mental structures? What are you normally thinking about? What leads you to think that way? Because if I'm thinking about bad things, I'll obviously feel bad. The feelings that I'm expected to feel are the bad ones. And if I feel bad, the behavior that I'm expected to exhibit is also a bad behavior. If I feel like, I'm a frustrated person, I feel like, okay, I'm not being treated properly, I'll be feeling frustrated. And if I'm frustrated, I'll just lash on anyone, I'll almost insult anyone, I'll be very, physical. I want to fight people because of what I feel and because of what I constantly think about. So I usually want to get to know what the thought pattern of a client is.
Okay, so really thank you for taking this time and doing this interview with me today.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you so much.